But if you're, willing to do what you need to do, get the help you need, take the action, you can also accomplish things. And for whatever reason, by the way, that I was supposed to have OCD, and I believe in God, and I believe that there's a purpose for everything, a reason for everything. I don't know what the reason is for me having OCD. I really don't. I can't imagine, but I figured God knows, and if for whatever reason that was in God's plan that I was supposed to do this, it's because somehow I feel it was to add something.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a sincere treat to welcome you to the Eternal Optimist podcast today. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and of course, we have someone that's kind of a dream come true to interview this person today, Mr. Bob Burg. Bob, anyone that's listening to my show knows who Bob Burg is, because I've talked about his book before, the impact it's had on me. Of course, the book being The Go-Giver. He's written other books as well. In fact, he's a well-known celebrity author and speaker. We're really just darn happy to have Bob on the show. So why don't I just introduce him and say, Bob, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us today, sir. How are you?
Well, thanks, Matt. Thank you for those kind words. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, you earned it, and it was years ago. I'm 47 today. It was when I was 36 years of age that I got into business coaching. Thank you. And this book, The Go-Giver, was the subject of the very first coaching retreat that I ever facilitated. The owner of the company said that this was very important to them. So I got a copy. I read it. Super impactful. And then I went and facilitated an entire event around the principles that you have been teaching. So this has been on my mind now for over 11 years. Wow. I just want to say thank you, because you've had a major impact on my coaching, even from 11 years ago, long before we met. So,
well, please know what an honor it is to know that. I appreciate that a lot.
Yes, sir. Well, Bob, I'd love to dive right in. One of the things we love to do on our show is ask our audience or ask our guests, what is it that's something that is a challenge for you? And it can be a current one, or it can be all the way back from birth, kind of give you carte blanche to share whatever it may be, because we want to learn how you endured, overcame, how you dealt with said challenge. So could you please take us back, Bob, to something that's been difficult or challenging for you in your life, and share the story?
Well, Matt, I'd say an overarching one has been that I have OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, which is it's kind of a strange thing, because most people now have heard of it, but it's very, very misunderstood.
Yes.
They think it's about just, obsessively washing hands, or which can be part of it, or they think it's that you have a superpower like Monk on the TV show because you have OCD, and whatever. Mm-hmm. Or people will joke around and say, "Oh, I'm so OCD about this," meaning that they obsessively clean side. All those things are kind of way off from what it really is. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a chemical imbalance in the brain based on a lack of serotonin. And what it does, aside from completely screwing up your life, is it pretty much does it through unwanted, horrible, horrid thoughts that are uncontrollable, and compulsions that you do sort of in a way to magically rid yourself of the thoughts if you didn't do the compulsion, which of course never works and only makes it worse. That's about the only way I can describe it. There's no way that anyone listening who doesn't have it is really going to understand it, and I'm okay with that. And I don't want you to understand it, because I don't want you to have it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We'll just say it. It kind of takes up every hour of your waking and often sleeping life, and it's a struggle.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing vulnerably something that's been a challenge for you. And is this something that you just wake up one day and just realize something is off, or did this come on in later in life? I mean, how long have you been dealing with it?
So it was diagnosed when I was 26, and the reason it took that long is, and I'm 66 years old. Back then, they didn't know about this.
Okay.
So I grew up having it. Certain aspects tend to manifest at certain ages, they have found, okay, which I won't go into details. It's just that the certain elements of of ways it manifests itself at certain ages, and that is what happened with me. But I always had it. Just didn't know about it. Now, of course, they with places like the Obsessive Compulsive Foundation, the IOCDF. .org. They do a wonderful job of recognizing it, giving people hope, and being able to. It's not something that can be cured yet.
Okay.
It can be managed to a certain point, and I think they're finding more and more ways to do it. But no, I was in that era of they didn't know about that until I was in my mid-20s. Or, it wasn't well known enough that I would be diagnosed.
So you have had a real challenge with this disorder, and while living with that, you've still been able to produce one of the most impactful books that's ever been written on the subject of relationships. And
thank you.
How did you manage to cope with that while tapping into your genius that all of us know and love?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. First, understand that my co-author, John David Mann, was a huge part of that. He's a wonderful writer. I'm a how-to guy, right? All of my books before then, after that, until my latest, because I just co-authored another business fable with another parable with another person. But before that, all my other books were how-to books. I'm a how-to writer. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So yeah. So John, though, is a magnificent storyteller. So he's the one who made the story come alive, which is, a big part of it. But I would say this, Matt, because, there's people who've said, well, probably your OCD had also something to do with your success. No, it did not. One does not become successful because of OCD. One becomes successful in spite of OCD. Yeah, absolutely. It's not, it's not like on TV and things like that. It does not give you superpowers. It's given me certainly a lot of empathy for people. I'm able to relate to people's pain, I think, a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's maybe my superpower, if you will. But I would gladly trade that to not have OCD. You know what I'm saying? And so, but yeah. So there's. I'd say this. I think I could have done a lot more in this world had I not had OCD.
Okay.
It held me back. A bit. So but you fight through it, and that's one of the things that I think you bring to the world, because what you do through your show and through your philosophy is you share that, okay, life is life. But if you're, willing to do what you need to do, get the help you need, take the action, you can also accomplish things. And for whatever reason, by the way, that I was supposed to have OCD, and I believe in God, and I believe that there's a purpose for everything, a reason for everything.
Sir.
I don't know what the reason is for me having OCD. I really don't. I can't imagine, but I figure God knows. And if for whatever reason that was in God's plan that I was supposed to do this, it's because somehow I feel it was to add something to the world. And maybe it was that one person who heard my story who didn't realize that's what they have, or a parent who didn't realize that's what their child had. Maybe they got them help and was able to turn that kid's life. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know. But you do what you do with what you've got.
Yes.
And, and that's all you can do.
That is exactly the core of why I'm so impressed with what you're sharing, why I love you, because you have found a way with this challenge, in spite of this challenge, to still produce a number of, whether it's how-to books that you've created, or it's sharing your superpower with someone else and creating joint venture books, whatever it might be. Your impact is still felt, and you've made the best out of the hand you were dealt. And it sounds like the hand you were dealt wasn't the easiest hand to play, and you're still playing it, and you're not complaining about it. I'm not hearing you whine and complain about it. You're owning it completely. So how might the rest of us be able to take just the hard stuff that we're going through and be able to apply the Bob Burg philosophies, whatever those are for you, Bob? Because you're doing something really good.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I had great parents, okay, who, while they couldn't possibly understand what I was going through, they understood I was going through
Okay.
something, and they always were supportive. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And so that's very helpful. I mean, I can't even imagine had I grown up with all my things, growing up in a family where it was, the relationships weren't good, where it was cold and not understand. I mean, I was very lucky to have had the parents,
Yes, sir.
that I had. So I think that, one thing it says is for, everyone listening, many of whom are parents, is just, that the best thing you can do for your child is to be supportive, which I know they know anyway, and they already are. But I think that's a big thing when you've got a support team in your life. It certainly makes what you're going through. It's not that it makes it necessarily easier, but it does make it more navigable.
I thank you for sharing, because you've already broken a couple of paradigms or misconceptions I have about OCD, because I've been guilty in the past of saying that I am obsessed with some number of things. And I realized by saying
Well,
that I might be disrespecting people that really have it. So apologies for that. Uh,
no, that's okay. And let me share something with you. There is people. You can be obsessed with
yes.
things without it being OCD. So, in other words, some people are their obsession, and it's maybe an obsessive compulsive personality. It's not obsessive compulsive
Yeah.
disorder, but they have an obsessive compulsive personality. That, first of all, it's a totally different thing. It manifests itself much differently. But some of that obsessiveness does drive them to accomplish great things, and they may not even mind that obsessiveness. They enjoy it, in fact. So there's those, so I don't want anyone to think, oh, I can't say obsessive without offending them. No, it's only when people say, oh, I'm so OCD about that. And by the way, I don't get offended because I know people don't understand what it is. But politically correct wise, yeah, that is something in the OCD community that we all kind of roll our eyes a little bit when people say, "Oh, I'm so OCD about that," because it's total misnomer. But no, people can be obsessive about things, and that obsessiveness can work for them. That when it's a healthy obsession, hey, great things get accomplished. But that's just a totally different thing than having obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mm.
So please don't apologize for saying that you're obsessed about things or
Okay.
whatever.
Well, fair. Thank you. I'm looking, and by the way, one of the things I may have used to say that I'm pretty obsessed with, and I'm not OCD, I won't say that. I'll say I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with people's backgrounds on Zoom. And if you're on YouTube right now, team, you can see that Bob's background is taking me into like a really happy place, because there are literally there's no less than about 220 books. There's probably more. And I'm curious, have you read each of the books on your shelf back here? Because this is an impressive collection.
Yeah, just about. I mean, some are research
Yeah.
and things like that. But yeah, most of them. My whole house is. I mean, I always say my house is comprised of books with some scattered furniture. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm curious, what may have triggered the inspiration for you to become an author and start with endless referrals and go on to the Go Giver and now become this giant in the world of being an author? I mean, you're up there. I'm just a kid in the
Well,
candy store right now because of the impact you've
that's
had.
awfully kind.
How did this begin? This vision and dream of
Thank you.
being an author.
Um, so my first book, Endless Referrals, was really written for totally utilitarian reasons. So I had started I'd been in sales after broadcasting, and I had been on television, radio. I was a late night news guy for a very, very small ABC affiliate. I was not very good, and it wasn't long before I wasn't in TV anymore. Sales was a different thing. Once I started learning how to sell and studying the masters like Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and all these again, this is 40 whatever years ago, and things really changed, and I loved it. And what I really loved was the personal development aspect, right? Understanding that you had to grow yourself on the inside. So I was a lousy student in school. I barely graduated high school, and I went to a little state college that I got in on academic probation. And I'm pretty sure that if such a thing exists, I graduated on academic probation. And I'm not sure if that's a thing, but it would be if there was. So I had no respect for school, for education. I just want to get out of there and do my thing, which really came back to haunt me. However, once I got into sales, my education began.
Yes.
Because now there's all these books. There's, How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's The Magic of Thinking Big. There's Think and Grow Rich. There's The Richest Man in Babylon.
Oh my God. And it continues. You just named in order, the order when my dad was selling Amway, when I was in high school, 1992, the order in which he gave me the books that he gave me, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Magic of Thinking Big. The Richest Man in Babylon actually was the third book. The fourth book was Covey. And then he also gave me Hopkins. He gave me the art of that's Trump, Art of the Deal.
How to Master the Art of Selling.
Yeah, and Joe Girard's book too. But sorry to interrupt.
Joe Girard's was a great book, and he probably gave you some of Zig Ziglar's.
Absolutely,
I would imagine,
and the tapes from Zig and Les. Yes,
the tapes, and that's what. And back in my day, it was it was cassette tape albums. And so forth.
The new Lead the Field, that Earl Nightingale voice.
I was just going to say, Earl Nightingale, Lead the Field, The Stranger's Secret. So all these things I'm putting into my head, right? Yes. And I think at the time I'm selling television advertising, and just so while I'm on the road, I have tapes in all the time that I'm listening while I'm reading books at night, and I'm doing all that right. And I'm realizing that success is really an inside job. It begins here. It manifests itself outwardly, but it begins in here. So I'm just loving all of that. So years later, I'm a sales manager of another company, and so I began teaching others what was working for me, and started putting together kind of my own systems, but always based on what I learned from others.
Yes.
And so, I like to say I've never had an original thought in my life, right? But I've been really good at taking information, studying it, and then systemizing it. And, my feeling is I personally, and I'm not saying I'm right, this is just my definition, I define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. And once I understood that, that just made such a huge, huge difference. So my first book, as you'd asked, Endless Referrals, was because I started speaking. I had spoken. I built my speaking business up in about 3 or 4 years, which is about what it takes. And it was going really well. At the time, I was selling cassette tape albums from the stage after I'd speak, and was doing really well. And I attended a National Speakers Association meeting, and I met a couple of the older veteran speakers, and they said, "Burg, you're really ready to get a book out there." And I said, "Well, I really don't want to write a book, and I really enjoy just kind of selling the tapes and doing the thing." And they said, "Yeah, but I'll tell you, you're gonna be able to make yourself more marketable. You're gonna be positioned as an expert. You're gonna be able to charge higher fees. And they're naming off a bunch of these things." And it just happened that one of these people had an agent that he was willing to refer to me, which was just so kind of him. And this agent sold it very quickly, actually. Said, and so Endless Referrals came out, but again, that was simply to position myself as a speaker. It was not because I wanted to necessarily write the book. But the books I wrote after Endless Referrals were because I had a message I felt I wanted to share, and that doing it through a book would be the best way to do so.
And at some point along that path, it made sense. I'm guessing, you tell me, it made sense that now I am an author. I'm fully embracing this. I'm an author now. Is that, are you, I know you're an author, but is that the main thing now for you, Bob?
Yeah, it is now. And I think with The Go-Giver, what happened was, I'd always enjoyed reading parables. So Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World. And again, we talked about Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon. Remember that, the company that Joe worked for in The Go-Giver was Klassen Hill. Yeah. And that's after James Klassen and Napoleon Hill, for those two books. And so John and I, in many of the company names that we use in the Go-Giver series, we would take, authors' names that meant something, authors or leaders' names that meant something to us. But with that, I always loved the idea of maybe taking the general premise of endless referrals, which was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. I first wrote that in Endless Referrals, had been talking about that long before that. But I thought it would be great to take that and be able to create a parable for it, right? Never really did anything with it, though, until I met John David Mann. He was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for. And he was such a great editor, and his reputation back then to the people in his niche market, they just knew how brilliant he was and how fantastic a writer he was. So I brought the idea about, this story to him. And it, took a little while for him to say yes. But, once he did, we worked on it and didn't take long to get it written. But here's the thing. We went through 24 no's from New York publishing houses before the 25th one said yes after a year.
Wow. The guy that published my book, Mark Victor Hansen, told a very similar story when he got started about publishing books. Wow. Is that like the magic number?
He got a lot more.
You got to get 20 or 30 no's before you ever get a yes.
Mark. Mark, Mark and Jack, I think they got hundreds of no's from what I understand. Right. And now what's their book sold? Their books have sold 500 million or, coming up to 1 billion or something. So, if you believe enough in what you do, you stay with it. And eventually, if it's supposed to, good things happen.
Well, Bob, I know that your time is very valuable. I certainly appreciate you joining us today. I'd love to ask you a couple things to wrap up the next little while. You are a famous author, and you have infinite number of books on your shelf, it looks like, behind you. If you had to recommend a book or up to 3 books, what might be 1 to 3 books that have had a major outsized impact that you recommend?
It's the reason that's difficult to answer is because it sort of depends, but that's okay. I'll answer them definitely, but it's difficult because it kind of depends on what a person's looking for.
Great
right?
Answer. Yes.
And so, but I would say, generically speaking, I would suggest first How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
And the reason is because people skills are the difference maker, right? It's that difference between the person who achieves some real, good, legitimate success, and that person who's able to take it to that whole next level, being able to work effectively with others, because that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with people, and it's not necessarily a logical process.
That's right.
We're dealing with emotional people who and so being able to understand what really drives people, what makes people tick, and being able to respectfully deal with them in that way, that's the person who's going to, accomplish great things.
Awesome.
So that would certainly be one. Another one, and please forgive me for turning my back.
I can see on the shelf, I see Good to Great up there.
Is this book I read first back in the 80s. Yeah. It was published in 1960. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And this was the first book I read that taught me that we are really run by our unconscious belief system.
Yes.
Okay. That combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, everything that comes into our life. But really, by the time we're little more than toddlers, our basic set of beliefs regarding how we see the world, how the world works, what we can expect from the right. And so we grow up, and most of us, we really are subject to what I call an unconscious operating system, where we think we're making decisions based on free will, strength, and conscious choice, when in a sense, we're really living within a matrix, if you will, if you think of that, the first movie, where so this is the book that showed me that taught me that was brilliant. And what I really got from that is we can never accomplish anything more than our most limiting beliefs. And so it's a book that to me has just had a huge effect on my life.
Wow.
Another book that I really love, this was written, I think, in 1909, called Peace, Power, and Plenty by Orison Swett Marden. Mr. Marden he was the actual founder of Success Magazine back in the early 1900s. Yeah. And he wrote is very prolific, but really it's about understanding ourselves. Even the title, Peace, Power, and Plenty, it's inner peace. It's personal power, right? It's not the power over others. It's the power over ourselves, and plenty, which is abundance and creating abundance in our world. So I would go with those, even though there's certainly many, many more I've learned from and that I would suggest.
Fantastic. One thing I also noted is that when you showed Psycho-Cybernetics, you had like a bunch of sticky notes in there or page placements. I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Bob, is there anything else? Let's just say music, for example. Is there a song or music or an artist that really fills your bucket? Anything there that really lights you up?
So probably, in terms of growing up in the 70s, some of the music that I really loved, Electric Light Orchestra, Chicago, Jefferson Starship, and, some of those were very meaningful. But believe it or not, really my favorite music is the late 50s, early 60s, the golden oldies. And that I just really, really love. So
is there, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go to Spotify, just type in golden oldies and you commemorate our Boggle game to Bob Burg tonight. 60s. Thank you. Two questions to wrap up. I know the last question. I'm trying to think how to frame this. So we've covered music, we've covered books. Where is the next, if you can share it, the next book or the next thing that we can follow or that we can hear about that's coming down the pipeline from Bob Burg?
So I just a few months ago co-authored a sales parable with a guy named Jeff West, fantastic guy, and he was a wonderful salesperson and sales leader in his day. It's called Streetwise to Saleswise. The subtitle is Become Objection Proof and Beat the Sales Blues. And the reason why the blues is because it's set in New Orleans. And a lot of it is music, based around music. And Jeff is a former musician before becoming a sales professional. And so he wrote a great story and we really feel great about that book.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. Last question here, and that is, this is the Eternal Optimist podcast. What might Eternal Optimist mean to you?
I think, Matt, in a sense, it's having the faith to know that everything is for a purpose, that there is a reason for everything. And if you want to say, it's God's reason, and that's what I would say, but however you want to say it, if you believe that there is a reason for whatever happens to be happening, you can be optimistic because as long as you're doing the best you can with what you have, and it's for a purpose of making the world a better place, you can always have a feeling of joy that you are heading in the right direction. I'd say that's eternal optimism.
Okay, thank you, and so much appreciate you being here. You said we could have 30 minutes. We've got 2 minutes and 3 seconds to go. I want to ask you one question.
You go for it. Go ahead.
Here's the last question. It is from someone like me who is definitely a fan of your work and I have been for a number of years. I don't want to say I'm starstruck because I've been around other like big name people I respect, but for someone that might get a feeling of feeling starstruck or feeling some imposter syndrome, how might you advise that type of person to have a big, bold ask for referrals with someone like you?
Well, first, there's absolutely no reason to be starstruck around me. If you knew me well, you'd know that. So that's kind of a non-issue. As far, and what was the second part? And please forgive me. What was the second part?
I think it's how would you coach or advise someone who might feel starstruck to ask for a referral from someone that they look up to?
Right, and you said imposter syndrome. You mentioned. First of all, we all have it. I'm pretty sure we all have it. I have it from time to time. I've had it a lot in the past. I have it now sometimes, okay? Because I think, and Adam Grant, who wrote some wonderful books, including Give and Take and a whole bunch of them, explained it well in a way that I really enjoyed. And that is that the more you have learned certain things, the more things you know, in a sense, the more you understand that you really don't know a whole lot, right? You tend to doubt yourself when you've achieved a certain level of success, okay? The people who don't know what they don't know, they don't have imposter syndrome, right? So it's sort of what's that? And I'm thinking about, there's a certain law that talks about, and I'm just not recalling it, and I so apologize, but it basically says that the less you know about something, the more sure about it you are. And the more you know about something, the less sure you are about it. And the reason why is because the more you know about something, you know that there's a lot more to it than just what you know. I think that's really the same with imposter syndrome. That doesn't mean that, hey, great, I have imposter syndrome. But, it just means we can understand that if we have it, it's because we probably just understand that we don't know near what we realize we could know, and we know there's a lot more growth to go. I think that's really what I'm trying to say.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, sir. You're welcome back anytime. And, thank you from me and from our audience, sincerely. Much appreciated.